Hello, everybody, and welcome into the latest live broadcast. There I am. I had everything left over from yesterday still configured here with the build we started, and I was talking with Beth, the person that's ordering the computer for me, and I'm actually going to build another one of these next week, identical in many ways. And this one, we're going to finish up in a NZXT H510 case in black, and next week we're going to build one in white. And I think Beth is going to prefer, she wants the white case and Windows 10. So we'll make those minor changes on next week's build, and that one will go into the white NZXT H510. And this one that we're going to finish up today, this one will be available for sale if anybody's interested. Its cost of parts is what it's being sold for. And changes can be made if you want to change some of the parts, but reach out to me privately in email. You can use the email address here on the YouTube About page if you want to inquire about it. But essentially, you can look up the cost of the parts. You can get an idea of what these parts cost with sales tax. But there's no labor fee. There is a shipping charge, but that depends on how far I'm shipping it. Obviously, I can only ship in the United States, so. With that, welcome in everybody. Today it is Wednesday, the 25th of October, 2023. My name is Carey Holzman, and as I mentioned, we're picking up from yesterday's motherboard prep. And today we need to put the motherboard into a case along with a power supply, do some cable management, and then that system will be done. Move it off to the side, and we'll see what happens next. So Friday should be another build. I have two identical systems using this motherboard and two identical systems using the B760 chipset from ASRock. And those are being built for another customer in a 200R case. I only have two 200R cases left. They're going to a client that's already claimed them. And then I've got another client that wants a couple computers, but I'm having them evaluate a mini PC. So far, they're loving it. And when they need these two computers, which will be towards the end of the year, they can tell me if they want to stick with mini PCs going forward, or if we want to go to traditional tower and have me build it. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, thanks you guys so much for hanging out and joining me, and for all those contributions that have come in prior to the show. Paul O'Brien contributed €2. Thank you, Paul. And Planet Cryos has contributed 99-cent super chats 2 times, plus a $2 super chat. He says everyone is getting their Carey fix on. Right on. Well, I hope so. Thanks for hanging out. And hello, Shamim Kajveras is joining us from Sweden, I believe it is. And all my friends in blue and green, thank you so much for joining. Folks with the names in white, if you're friendly in the chat room, supportive, kind, just be kind. I do eventually turn people blue once I start to recognize them as regulars in the chat room. And as long as you're a kind individual and you make yourself known, if you don't participate in the chat, I can't possibly know you're in there. So speak up, say hello. It's really easy to be kind, and it has its own rewards. We'd love to see this community grow with more like-minded, kind individuals, keeping this very unique place that's friendly and supportive here on the internet. Maintaining that. That's my goal. So thank you for being a part of it. David Graham contributes $2, and he says hello. Frankie B sent in a very generous Amazon gift card prior to the show, so thanks to our good friend Frankie B for the Amazon gift card. As I mentioned, I'm hoarding the Amazon gift cards right now because of Black Friday coming up. It's about 4 weeks away, and that'll be here in a blink of an eye, and I want to make sure that if there's stuff I want on sale, I don't want to be held back because I don't have the money to buy it or have to put it on a credit card, which then, if I don't pay the credit card off right away, negates any savings on the sale, right? So thank you guys for supporting the channel and helping me stay independent from sponsors controlling what I can say or what I can review. It's because of your contributions that I can do this. Nick Poverman said, how's the QNAP NVMe NAS working out for your client? Well, I've got two clients that are using them right now. One client has been using it for about a month and they love it. The other client, we're still getting their data and moving it over to the QNAP, so it's not been deployed yet, probably not for another 2 or 3 weeks, but we're off to a good start. I reached out to the folks at TerraMaster because my TerraMaster NAS, the one I reviewed here, died. And so they want me to run some diagnostics on it for them, which means essentially I'm going to make a little video for them showing, you turn it on, the lights come on and they go off. And they want the video output recorded to see what it's doing. So I'll make that video for them maybe later today after today's video and see what they say. In the meantime, I went on Amazon. I just bought another one because I'm really loving that TerraMaster NAS. I just took my 222 terabyte drives out, popped it into the new NAS, and I'm back up and running. Everything was on the drives, the software, the configuration, the passwords, all of it. So I didn't have to change anything in the system settings of the new NAS because it's apparently all stored on the drives. And the drives are all 100% healthy. I was a little concerned because they are refurbished drives, but no problem there. And tablet just got an Android update. See if I can get into the chat room here with this. It says we got 150 people watching around the world. Right on. Welcome in. Welcome in. And yeah, so everything is mostly left as it was yesterday. I just unplugged everything from the board. So the power switch is removed. The power supply, the test power supply I use, I've unplugged it and set it aside. We're going to use the NZXT C650 power supply. And then when I do the duplicate of this, I'm going to use the same power supply again. This one's going to go into an NZXT H510 case, which I guess I can take out now. Let me find somewhere to put this temporarily so we have room for the case. I'll just set this over here. And I've already got the case out of the box. I was just doing that before the show started. This is the NZXT H510. I think it's a pretty good deal for around $80. It's got the glass panel on the side. And cable management, super easy. The front port umbilical, for the hard drive LED, power LED, all that's on one plug versus 4 separate cables. It's all just one plug. You plug it in. Good build quality, good price. Up on top, we've got a single USB Type A and a single USB Type C. That kind of sucks. I wish there were 2 USB Type A's up here, since the Type C uses its own connector, and the connector the single USB Type A uses is actually hosting 2 in that connector. And if they don't, the manufacturer doesn't give it to you, it's just gone. So that kind of sucks, but it's not a perfect case, but it's a really good value. I think it's really well made. It's easy to work in, good airflow. They make several different versions of this case. They have what they call the Flow version, which is all mesh in the front. They've got a Flow RGB version, which is the mesh front with RGB fans behind it. And then there's this version. So if you are going to order one of these cases, be careful over which model you're ordering. And they come in black or white, so be sure you choose accordingly so you don't get surprised when a case you thought you ordered isn't what arrives in the mail. You've got to pay attention to all those details. And it's all reflected in the price. Obviously, if you want the Flow version, that costs more. If you want the Flow RGB version, that costs even more. So should be sort of a heads up right in the price before you complete your purchase. Now I've got all the boxes and everything from yesterday still just sitting right here. These are all going to go in the motherboard box, which I have placed somewhere with the motherboard. I have so many projects going on here. It's amazing. I can remember is that I put the motherboard that I just moved was sitting on the motherboard box. And we're going to just take all these spare parts, documentation, empty boxes, they'll fit in here. Just put all this in here. And whoever buys the system will get all that unless they don't want it. You'll definitely want the manuals and extra screws and whatnot. So that at least gets it off the counter off our bench so we have a little bit more elbow room to work with. And this should be a pretty straightforward video. Should be. So to take off this glass panel, there's just one thumb screw right here. I'm going to unscrew that, and it stays captive, and I just push. There's a bent piece of metal here. I push against that. This panel will come off like so. And I will set it down here. And then we're going to take off this side next. Those are on awfully tight. Paul O'Brien contributes €5. He says, for my babe Marilena towards a meal after the stream. You guys must think I don't feed her. Thank you, Paul. And there's our side panel. We'll take that off. Set that down there with the other one. Now there's the inside of the case. You'll see the white box down there. That's our screws and mounting hardware. Every case comes with its own set of mounting hardware because every case has different options, different number of drives, and the type of tapped holes for screws will be varied by pitch and length depending on the manufacturer. So a lot of times you cannot move the screws or reuse the screws from one case to another case, even if it's from the same manufacturer, surprisingly enough. So as down here, as you can see, we've got the white box that I'm referring to that has our mounting hardware. We're not going to use all of it. That would assume you were filling every slot in every bay, which we're not going to do. And we want to keep anything left over for any future upgrades or repairs. So always put this away somewhere where you could find it. I recommend saving the old motherboard box and just throwing it all in there. Doesn't have to be in any particular order. Just know that it's somewhere in the box and you'll find it when you need it, assuming you can find the box. You'll see this case comes with a rear fan already installed. We've got a power supply shroud here. We've got two 2.5-inch drive bays here. We've got built-in cable management tracks that I absolutely love. And we've got our front port umbilicals here, which I told you about earlier, where the power LED and hard drive LED power switch, it's all on one connector instead of 4 separate connectors. And we've got our 3.5-inch drive bay where you can hold two 3.5-inch mechanical drives will fit down there. For anybody still using mechanical drives. And I suppose I can take this piece off of here. Free up those umbilicals. So we've got audio. We've got USB. Wait a minute. That's not USB, is it? Oh, that's our front panel. Yeah, that's a front power switch, reset switch, power LED. Actually, I don't think this has a reset switch. But power LED, hard drive LED, and power switch are all on that one connector. This is our USB 3 for the front port. Again, this gives us 2 in this connector, but the manufacturer is only giving us 1. Nobody ever complains they've got too many front USB ports. It's always too few. So to reduce that, just to save a couple of bucks, I'd rather have spent the extra couple bucks and gotten it. But I do appreciate we have the USB Type-C, which has a little cover on it right there. And this motherboard does support a front USB Type-C. Not all motherboards do. And then we've got a fan connector here for this fan up top. Now, I'm not a fan having a fan on top. I think that's a bad idea, so I'm taking that out. So one of 2 things I don't like about the H510 case is this fan up top and the lack of a, the fact that we only have 1 USB type A up front instead of 2, even though it's plugged into 2. It's only giving us 1. Really upsets me. But with a combination of 1 type C and 1 type A, we still end up with 2. So I'm not sure how many people are using Type-C at this point. Of course, we don't have any front bays, so we can't add any more. We could get a hub, plug it in. Of course, the motherboard has plenty of USB in the back. This can be a little convenient. And we can move this fan to the front, or we can take it out altogether. If there's no GPU being installed, because we're going to be using, we're building this using the integrated graphics on the Intel CPU, there's no reason to put a fan up front if there's no discrete GPU. It's nothing to cool. So all you're doing is you're bringing in more dust, which then acts as an insulator, and ultimately your system will run hotter because you added an extra fan, unless you're staying on top of it, constantly blowing it out. Sure that you're keeping that dust at bay. So my preference is to just leave it out, quite honestly. It's just one more part to fail. Parts that fail first are usually moving parts like fans and mechanical drives, especially if somebody's like wanting to move over from an older computer and they want to say, oh, well, I'm still going to use my hard drive because it still works. I'm still going to use my fans. Those will be the first parts that will fail on your new build. Sometimes people want to move over old parts that are just simply not compatible with new hardware, and then they'll run into problems getting those to work. So my recommendation is, if the parts are more than 3 or 4 years old, don't carry them over to your new build. Unless you have DDR4 RAM and you're building a system with DDR4 RAM. The bottom line is RAM is cheap now, solid state drives are cheap now. Why would you do that to yourself and potentially hinder the reliability of your brand new computer by carrying over old parts, which may also be a bit slower, not allowing your brand new system to run at its ultimate peak performance as a result of you trying to recycle parts. This is just my attitude. I also wouldn't want to support anybody that has a combination of new and used parts. The money they save will cost me money in business, tying up my time, trying to walk them through problems they should have never had. They would have bought all new parts and everything was under warranty. So choose for yourself, but when you're building for other people, something very important to keep in mind. It's okay if you want to save people money, but I don't think it's okay if the way you're saving the money is that it's costing you money. It's not a sustainable business model. Okay. I want to get this out of my way. That over here. Okay. I left the keyboard and mouse dongle plugged into the motherboard, so I'll set those aside for right now. Yeah, I can almost guarantee if you are not going to heed my advice and you're going to insist on using parts from your old build onto your new build, that will be your first point of problem, whether that's during the build or whether it's a year down the road or 2 years down the road. Statistically, those will be the parts that will come back to haunt you, and they might haunt you right at the get-go where you can't even get the system to run. Now, if you enjoy that challenge and you enjoy investing that kind of time just to insist, to be stubborn, or it's the principle of the matter, have at it. But please don't pull me into that. Like I said, I wouldn't support a computer like that, and I'm advising you not to. And for whatever you're saving on those parts, you've got to consider the value of somebody else's time who you're asking for help. So if it's costing that other person their time to help you because you didn't want to spend the money, that's not fair to the other person. If you bought a brand new computer and the person who built it used old parts, you should fully expect them to support it because that's what they agreed to when they built it for you. And if you do it to yourself and you build it with used parts and you have problems, you should know to expect this. Like I said, even if it doesn't happen right away, they will statistically be the first parts to fail on your new build. I can't tell you when that'll be, but they'll be first. So at the most, you're saving some money temporarily until you have to replace the parts anyway. And at the worst, you're spending a lot of time. If you've got nothing else better to do, I suppose it's busy work, keeps you out of trouble. But if you were doing this for a living, it's not a good way to stay in business. Okay, so in the parts box, we've got an installation manual for the case, and we've got a Ziploc bag that contains some nylon zip ties. We've got a headphone splitter. I guess that's for audio out, which is a single 3.5 millimeter jack that contains both microphone and headphone inputs and outputs. So if you wanted to separate those into separate jacks for headphones, separate jack for microphone, that's what the splitter does. It's unusual that they include that. It's a nice touch. But most people, that's something you would expect you'd have to buy separately. That can go over there. And let's just take a look here, see what I'm missing in the chat. Mark Gaines contributed £5. Right on. Thank you, Mark. Mark joining us from Northern Ireland says, hello, Carey and the lovely Marlita DG, camera girl. Samuel Kowalski with $5 in Super Chat said, just showing a little support for Marlena, camera girl. What am I, chopped liver? Thanks, guys. No, I appreciate you supporting the channel. Shamim Kashviras is now a member for 5 months. Hello, dear Carey. Hope you're doing well. Always wishing you health and success. I'm glad to be a member of this community for another month. Hugs from Sweden. That is awesome. Thank you so much for being a member and continuing your membership. And it's so cool how we have viewers all over the world joining us. Sweden and Norway and Canada and Ireland and Scotland and England. Yeah, it's still very surreal. I just can't get used to that. So the case is now ready for us to go ahead and put our motherboard and power supply into. As I mentioned, I'm using the NZXT C650 bronze. It's for on sale, I want to say, for around $60 or $70. I really like these power supplies that NZXT makes. They're a little bit more money, but they're very high quality and they have an excellent warranty on them. These right here are warranted for, some of them are 10 years. This is an 80 plus bronze, so it's not, this is sort of at the lower end of the price spectrum. And I'm not sure what our warranty is. I've never had one of these go bad, so not really worried about the warranty. But when you get into the higher end, they do have 10-year warranties on their higher end stuff. You're spending $130 on a power supply or so. John Williams said he had an issue with a license for Windows 10 that he purchased from VIP CDK deals didn't work, but they corrected it for him. He said they have excellent service and everything's working now. Yeah, well, that can happen. That's why I say, at least with the sponsors that I associate myself with, that I align myself with, they stand behind their product 100%. Sometimes mistakes get made, and it's not a big deal if a part fails or something, an issue with the product, as long as the company that sold it to you stands behind it. And there's a lot of shady Windows license key sellers out there that are happy to sell you the key, but they won't respond to any support requests or may not even sell you what they claim to have sold you. You might have asked for a Windows 10 Pro key and ended up with a Windows 10 Enterprise key, stuff like that. So do know that the folks over at VIP CDK deals stand behind and guarantee the keys they sell are legitimate and they will activate over the internet. You're not going to have to call Microsoft or do any of that nonsense. And should that not occur, and that can happen for a number of reasons, you just reach out to them and let them know and they will make it right. If for any reason they don't make it right, well, then you reach out to me and I'll make it right. But I can tell you that they don't want me to have to make it right. That doesn't make them look good. And it could jeopardize their sponsorship if I find out that a lot of people are not getting good support from them. Then I won't align myself with them anymore. But we've been together now for what, about 2 years. We've been offering the keys from VIP CDK deals. And I've heard nothing but good things from everybody who's used them and saved money and had peace of mind that there was no risk. Yeah, you can probably find the keys a couple dollars cheaper somewhere else and roll the dice and hope it works. But get that extra peace of mind, and you know, a Windows 10 Pro key is like under $17. So I ate at Arby's the other day. It cost me more than that. Randy Phillips says he loves the computer I built for him. Right on. Well, hearing that never gets old. Thank you, Randy. Stick that over there. Okay, so this is how these are packed. Just in case you order one, it should look like this in the box. If it doesn't, you might have received a used product. We've got a bag here which has a power cable as well as our modular cables. This is a semi-modular power supply, which means it's got the motherboard power connector and the GPU power connector are already plugged in. And we get a little card here, NZXT support. And then underneath the styrofoam is our power supply that's put into a gauze-like bag for some reason. I don't understand. And yeah, there it is. It's a pretty small, shallow power supply. Set that over here. So close this up and get it out of my way. Workbench is small, so I need to just keep things moving, keep things clear. So an NZXT case, NZXT power supply, you know we're not going to have any fitment issues, right? Robert McCord Magumi says, hello, welcome in. Alvin Shaver, Les Stevenson, and Luke Greeny, a Garfield Rupe, Thomas MacT, Jim KJ3N, Matt Zoloff, all joining us saying hello. Welcome in, gentlemen. Power cable, that'll go in the motherboard box. Screws. So even though we will have received some screws that we could use for the power supply, I prefer to use the screws that come with the power supply. Although in many situations, the screws that come with the case and the screws that come with the power supply will be the exact same screws. The only time I wouldn't use the screws that come with the power supply is if, let's say, the screws were silver and we're on a black case. A lot of people wouldn't even notice it anyway, but it's one of those little details that, as a professional system builder, I'm on the lookout for. I take a lot of pride in my work, and I don't like to say that's good enough. It's got to be right, or I'm not putting my name on it. Now, this bag is going to contain all the modular cables, and that includes, let's see, what do we have here? We have an additional CPU cable, which is good because this motherboard will take 2. We've got a Molex power cable. We've got another, this is a SATA power cable, and another VGA power cable. So this is really well equipped for, if you're putting in a GPU that requires 4 power cables because there's 2 connectors on each power cable, and a motherboard that needs 2 CPU connectors, 2 CPU EPS power connectors, which isn't that common. So you don't often find power supplies that come with 2. In most cases, you only have to use 1 unless you're overclocking. I like to use them whether I need them or not, just because if I've got the power supply that has the capability and motherboard has the spot for it, even if the customer's not using it, it's there should they ever change their mind and decide they want to use it later. Bayhome43 says, Carey, I love your OCD. It serves you well, right? That's what I think. So initially we were building this motherboard for Bayhome43, but we're actually going to build a different one. So on probably Tuesday, next Tuesday, we'll build an identical system to this, and it will be with Windows 10, and it will go into the same case, but in white. And that one will go to Bayhome43. That'll be shipped out. And this one, when we're done with it today, as I mentioned earlier, this one will be available for sale. And if you want to inquire on it, you can reach out to the email address on the About page of my YouTube channel. So I just didn't want to confuse Bayhome43. I have 2 of these to build, so I have to, the white case won't be until Saturday. So I thought, well, what am I going to do today? I got to finish this one up anyway, so we'll just finish this one. Still have to build another one anyway, so this all works out. It's me ahead of where I need to be. Now, I don't think I'm adding any other cables to this based on the configuration of what we're building today. So this can just go in right now. Sometimes it's beneficial if you know, say you've got a liquid cooler or you're adding some mechanical drives. It's easier to plug these modular cables in most situations, in most cases, prior to putting the power supply in. But it does look like this power supply gives us plenty of room between the cage and the back of the power supply. Because it's not a very deep power supply, it doesn't go all the way back. That's going to make it easier to add modular cables in the future should somebody want to do that. Then, let's get that power supply aligned. I got my 4 screws. I'm going to save this little plastic bag because a lot of times I get little screws left over and I like to save them and I go, I should have thrown away the little bag. So let's go ahead and put the power supply in. It's 4 screws, 1 in each corner. The top left corner, I think, is the one offset by about 1 inch. Doesn't go, doesn't go immediately to the corner. It goes a little offset. In this case, it looks like it's the, let's see, where is it? Yeah, it's going to go right there, and then the rest will go in the corners. So we're clear. And these can be a little difficult to align because of the shroud. Oopsie. Yeah. Get that started anyway. So this one, this top left side, we go in about 1 inch. Right there. This one, I don't know why it got stuck. So I want to increase my torque. There we go. All right, that puts power supply in. I mean, that was difficult, right? And I don't like leaving the power supply screws torqued at such a low torque setting that I've got this set at. So what I'll do is I will manually tighten them down to where I feel they're better. Because when I ship this, I don't want the power supply breaking loose, but at least we do have a shroud, so the power supply won't flop around in there. And next we can put the motherboard in. So I'm going to lay this case flat like so, and we're going to work with gravity. Now our motherboard already has the IO shield built on the back of it, so that should make this super easy as long as all of the standoffs are installed. The pre-installed ones, I hope, are all in the right place. Let's go find out. I'm going to grab this motherboard over here, and I'm going to look at how many mounting holes we have for screws. I see, oh, I do see an extra one. that we don't normally have on motherboards. Bring this over to the camera and I'll show you. So normally you have 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, and 3 down the middle, and 1, 2, and 3 down the side. But here we've got an extra right here. Now you don't have to use that. However, you know, OCD, if it's, I'm sure the engineers put that there for a reason. I don't need to know the reason. I'm going to use it. And I just want to make sure the case has an extra standoff that we can put down in there to accommodate that space. Otherwise, I will use a plastic standoff or nylon standoff. But I do believe this case has a spot for that. That's a standard micro ATX mounting point. You typically get those 3 because the micro ATX boards don't go as far down. They're not as long. So it's unusual that they've given us that micro ATX mounting point along with the regular ATX mounting point below it. So that gives us 4 mounting points down the left side instead of the traditional 3. We still have the traditional 3 down the middle and 3 down to the opposite side. That's going to be a total of what, 11, 10 screws? So just want to look in here and see if there's a spot for that. Yeah, there is a spot for it. So in this bag of parts, there'll be an extra standoff or 2 in here. All right, there's Bull 142 joining us. Welcome in, Bull 142. This right here is a breakaway connector. You know how I mentioned that they put the power switch, reset switch, and power LED? Sorry, there's no reset switch. So power switch, RGB LED, and power LED are all on one connector. But what happens if your motherboard has them spaced out or the connector doesn't fit the standard? Seems highly unlikely you're ever going to encounter that. But just in case, this little cable right here, which they've included with the case, allows you to take that single connector and you plug this into that single connector, this end, and then it breaks it into the separate cables you're accustomed to seeing. So that's a really classy touch. I'm glad they do that because nobody should ever need this, quite frankly. If you're building a new computer or a computer within the last 20 years, I just can't imagine you're going to have a motherboard that doesn't have a standard configuration where this is required, but it's a nice touch that they included. We've got some fine threaded screws. We've got some nylon zip ties. A lot of nylon zip ties, apparently. We've got some coarse threaded screws. These are probably what we're going to use for mounting the motherboard. And then in here, we've got 4 screws that look like they're for the power supply. In fact, they're identical to what was included by the power supply. And given the power supply is made by the same company that makes the case, they probably literally are the same exact screws. So those are extra. And I'm looking for an extra standoff. So let me just look in these bags here with my glasses to see if there's a standoff in any of these. These are fan screws. So if you want to add fans to the front of the case, although in most cases, when you buy fans, they usually come with fan screws. These are flat screws. These are probably for mounting your 2.5-inch drives. Right here in this bag, they give us one standoff and a standoff socket. So what the standoff socket does is it allows you to use a standard Phillips screwdriver. That's what this is. It allows you to use a standard Phillips screwdriver to put this over this standoff and use it to tighten it so you don't have to use pliers and scratch it all up. Now, I just so happen to have a 5mm ratcheting wrench that is dedicated just for standoffs. So I don't use the little standoff socket because that's just a little too ghetto for me. But that'll go in the bag or in the motherboard box with the rest of the spare parts. I'm going to put the standoff right here in the mounting point. In fact, it's the only empty hole on the left side of the case. So you don't have to worry about getting it in the right spot. And then I grab my ratcheting tool here with the 5mm socket on it. This is from Harbor Freight Tools. It comes in a big kit. I just take the 5mm socket out and I just leave it that way. Righties tighties. And we'll tighten that bad boy down. Now the center standoff here on the case is just a post, and that's to help you align the motherboard. So we're not going to use a screw there. So even though we have 10 standoffs, we will use 9 screws. Now that's not true of all cases. In fact, the cheaper the case you buy, especially if it's some no-name brand nobody's ever heard of, the more likely they're not going to offer that little convenience for you. So with that done, now I should be able to grab the motherboard and do a dry fit. We'll just see if it goes in there okay. And make sure that all of the pre-installed standoffs all align with the mounting holes in the motherboard. So we're going to set this in. You'll see I carry it by the heatsink. I don't touch any electronic parts ever, which is why I don't need to wear an anti-static strap. And I always hold things by the edges or by the heatsink. And that way, if there is an electrostatic discharge, it dissipates into the heatsink, or it's not going to touch any of the components. So if you still want to wear an anti-static wrist strap, I mean, knock yourself out. I've been doing this over 30 years. We don't use them. And when you handle the parts correctly, if you know what you're doing, you shouldn't need to wear one, in my opinion. All right, so with the motherboard installed, I need to just make sure that it goes over that center post, that center standoff with the post. There it goes. It just seated down. And then I just need to check and see through the mounting holes of the board to make sure that it's aligning, and it is aligning with all of the standoffs. So now the next question is, which screw do I use to mount the board? And I'm going to guess it's not these fan screws. No. It's not these fine threaded screws. That's the socket for the standoff. These are the 4 screws typically used for a power supply. That only leaves me 1 bag left. And these are 6/32, I guess. Flat screws. These must be the screws for the standoff that we're going to use. Gonna focus. There it is. They give us a lot of them. You'll know right away if it's not the right screw if you don't have at least 9 of them, right? So a lot of these bags don't even have 9. This one only has 4. So you don't even have to look at them. You know it's not enough. It can't possibly be the motherboard screws. These M3x5 flat screws, usually it's 4 per drive, and then this has room for how many drives? So 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, it looks like there's enough for 3 drives to be installed using 4 screws each. And fan screws, they give you 8 fan screws, so that'll accommodate 2 fans somewhere in the case. I guess you'd put them up front. All right, so I'm going to just dump these out on the counter here. And we need 9, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it still leaves me a lot of extras. That's because these also will be used if you're mounting any 3.5-inch mechanical drives. So that's why you get so many of those. It's the same coarse, shallow screw used on the motherboard install as on the hard drive install, at least with this case. It's not always that way. Case manufacturers may vary the types of screws they use, as I mentioned before, even from the same manufacturer. They might do it differently from one model to another. That's why it's important when you're done with your build, you take all those extra screws and you put them away where you can find them, because at some point you're going to do some work to this. Whether that's upgrade, a repair, you're going to want those screws, and you're going to find out just how hard they are to find. You might try stealing screws from another case. And if you're lucky, they'll work, but they generally just not quite right. I'm just going to get these screws started. That way I can still wiggle the board around if needed to get it to align with the holes beneath, the standoffs beneath the mounting holes. Okay, 3 more left. Last one, it's going to go in this top left corner up here. Now, wait a minute. I'm one short. I'm missing the one up in the top middle. What's that problem right now? Screwdriver automatically shuts off when it hits my predefined torque setting, which is set to 3. Now, these do not all have to be torqued to the same spec, just my OCD. We don't put one in the middle. Want to make sure that one's in all the way. If I can get the screwdriver to sit into the head of the screw, that would probably help. There we go. All right, so that mounts the board. It also mounts our power supply, and that effectively is the build. All that's left is running some cables. So we have the motherboard power cables to run. We have the front port umbilicals, which includes the front port USB, front port audio. And then we can turn it back on and make sure it still boots. So I'm going to start by removing the wire ties that are holding these front port umbilicals on, because you don't want these in your system once you're done. If you have any metal wire ties left over, I strongly recommend you remove them and replace them with nylon zip ties. These will get brittle over time. They will break and they will bounce around inside of your case anytime you move it. And if they should happen to get behind your motherboard, they'll short circuit it and your whole system will need to be replaced. You will potentially brick the entire system. That's a user created problem, not a warranty issue. And you'll have to replace things at your own cost. All because you were too lazy or you couldn't be bothered to take out the wire tie months earlier or years earlier and replace it with a nylon zip tie, which, you know, way safer, cleaner looking, and they're very inexpensive. It only takes a few seconds. Preventive maintenance. I'd rather be proactive than reactive. I'm going to go ahead and remove the wire tie off of our power supply cables here. Now, we're not using the graphics card power. I don't know why NZXT includes graphics card power in a semi-modular power supply. Normally, you only get motherboard power connectors. So that was an interesting choice. But again, because we've got the power supply shroud, we can easily hide that extra cable right into this cavernous area down here, which is all covered on this side. So no one will ever see it. In fact, even using a modular power supply on this build really isn't that necessary, because we could take all those extra cables and just shove them in. Okay, so here's our big motherboard power cable. Here. Can't see anything. Studio lights in my eyes. It might also be a good idea to lay the case flat when you're doing this. I'm having a very hard time seeing, and so I've got very bright lights on me. So I need to use some assisted lighting here for me. This is a very easy connector to put on if you can see the connector. Little detail like that. Huh, this one doesn't want to go on. So I'm going to lay the case flat. That way I can push down. That's going to be a little easier. A lot easier. See, right on. Now the other power supply cable that we're going to hook up are those two EPS power connectors, which are way up in the top corner up there. So I'm going to grab, see, that's the GPU connector. So we're going to just shove that. We'll wire tie that later, but it can go down into this hidey hole. And we'll take the two, oh, wait a minute, that's not, got it backwards. This one is the GPU power connector. That one will go in the hidey hole. The one I just had, that is a single CPU power connector, and I forgot I should have put the other one on, but I can do that now. It's very easy to get in there, thankfully. So run this right up in this top slot up here. There's a little cutout, and if I'm creative enough, I should be able to angle this just so. There we go, and get it through that slot. That keeps our cable management looking nice and tidy. And I can plug this onto either of the two connectors up there, and then we'll use the other cable, plug into the remaining connector. As I mentioned, we really only need one of these hooked up unless we're overclocking. But since the power supply can accommodate it, it's not going to hurt us to hook it up even if we're not using it. And it won't benefit us to not hook it up, so why not hook it up? Can I help you? I'm still finding wire ties.
Oh, that look good.
Black and white usually go together,
Yeah.
but also white and white will look good too.
Cool.
Yeah, so we'll do this is the black version of this build, and we'll do a white version of this build. And then I've got the front port umbilicals. So this here, this is our power switch, RGB LED, power LED that I mentioned, is all on one connector. That'll come up from down here. Bring that in. Mats Olof with a 100 Swedish krona contribution. He says, I thought a bit, what is OCD? Not everyone has that by any means. Keep it up, CareyHolzman. Obsessive compulsive disorder, or what I like to call putting stuff back where it belongs. You know what you never hear me say? Where are my keys? Right? I never say that because I always know where my keys are. I hate looking for stuff. It bothers me. It's a waste of time. Okay, so our front panel connector is right here in the bottom right side. It says panel right on the circuit board of the motherboard, just in case you weren't sure. It's also a very specific size with a pin missing so that you are less likely to plug this into the wrong place. This funky looking one, this is our USB Type-C header. That will plug in right by the power cable we just plugged in. And that just pushes in, and there's no clip or anything. It's just held in. It just locks in through just a friction fit. This blue connector, this is our big USB Type-A connector for the front. That will also go, let's see, That goes just below the USB Type-C connector right there. It only goes in one direction. It's keyed. So it has a notch in it, and the notch prevents you from plugging it in upside down. And it's a unique shape and size. There's only one place it'll fit. Some motherboards may have two, and it'll work equally well in either place if you have a board that has two of them. Finally, this is our front port audio connector, and that typically is going to go somewhere into this opposite side, the bottom left side. And so what I try and do is run that as close as I can get. Some cases are more considerate of this cable than others. So I run that through, and again, I need some light so I can see. Just fell out. Back in. So you see I'm pulling that through, right through here. It's going to go right into that side. It's got a pin missing. In this case, the pin missing is on the top row. So orient the connector with the blocked pin on the top row. And you're going to push that on. It's just a friction fit. And you're going to wiggle and push at the same time until it bottoms out against the bottom of the motherboard there. And then that's all of our connectors. Now, at this point, I could turn the machine on, and it should turn on. However, I do want to hook up that other EPS CPU power connector. Should be no big. It's GPU, SATA, Molex. Am I? Oh, right here. I'm like, did I dream that? No, it's here. Now, both sides are not the same. One side splits into two 4s, and the other side is a solid 4-pin connector. On this side here, it's etched CPU. This other one says nothing. This side has a big clip. Let me show you. So while these do look identical, you don't want to put them on backwards. I'm struggling to do that. See the size of the clip here? It's actually two clips because it's two 4-pin connectors that can separate, because some motherboards only want 4 connectors. But on the other 4-pin connector, look how small the clip is. This one, very small. And that is designed that way so it makes it extraordinarily difficult to plug that onto the motherboard. That skinnier clip always goes towards the power supply. And then the wider clip is wide because it's 2 clips, one for each 4-pin connector. And that's the side that'll plug into the motherboard. So we could just run this cable up here. You know, we don't have to plug it into the motherboard first. Do it at whatever order you want to do it in. Sometimes those clips are the things that get in the way of running it through the cable management holes. NZXT could have made that cable management hole just a millimeter or 2 wider, but it just requires you to find a unique angle that you can convince it to fit. There's really nothing you can do, like the top does not come off, so there's really nothing you can do besides just play with it a little bit so you figure out a way to get it in there. There we go. So I found going closer to this corner, seems like that worked a lot better. And while I've got all that slack, because I haven't plugged the other side in, it should make it real easy for me then to plug this cable onto the motherboard. I just want to make sure I'm not getting in my own way here. And again, the studio lights in my eyes are not helpful in this situation here. Where's my light? Of course I put it. I want this cable out of my way. There we go. Something else that's a little unusual is they braided this one cable for the power, for the CPU power, but they did not braid the other one. It's just a flat ribbon style cable. Again, the OCD does not like that lack of consistency, but no one's ever going to see it anyway. And if they do see it, they probably won't notice it. You know what I mean? Like they'll see it, but they won't really notice any difference or care because they're not looking at that level of detail. Now this end of the cable, this will go in the back of the power supply here, where it says, it'll say CPU/PCIe, because the GPU power connector, if we were using a GPU, these power cables use the same plug on the back of the power supply, and they'll give you multiples. So if they've given us, say, 2 GPU power cables and 2 CPU power cables, then we should have a total of 4 CPU/PCIe plugs on the back. And thankfully for me, that's right here closest to the edge power supply. Now the rest of these cables and the main power cable will go in the motherboard box. I could even include this fan if the user decides they want to put it in. I think it's foolish to add this other fan unless, as I mentioned, you're going to cool a graphics card in there. Otherwise, you're just bringing in more dust. Moving parts are the first parts traditionally to fail. So you will eventually deal with a failed fan. Best to avoid putting fans in unless you absolutely need them. I see people go overboard with the fans. If you're doing RGB and you just want a bunch of lights and you're putting the fans in for the lights and not for the cooling, it's a different purpose, different aesthetic. Okay, so now we can plug this in and make sure that it all works. Oh, I've got the rear fan to hook up. And that cable is right here. Let me see on the motherboard. I know we have a number of fan headers to choose from. Where do I want to run it? I can run it right down here. So if we take this cable, NZXT has done a great job of tucking it away for us. We can run it straight down, and then right under here, and then right onto the fan header that's right here at the bottom of the motherboard. There's actually several. Well, these are all 4-pin fan headers. That's a 3-pin fan. But it's got grooves in the connector, so you can't put it in upside down, and you can't put it on the wrong 3 of 4 pins. It only goes in one way. And yeah, that's it. So now let's hook it all up. Let me step around and get things plugged in here. So we need internet, video, keyboard and mouse we already have, power right here. Flip the power switch to on, and you'll see our RGB lights up. I don't have to worry about getting the power LED on backwards or the hard drive LED on backwards because NZXT makes that foolproof with that one connector. Every motherboard, every case manufacturer should be doing it. Don't know why it's only NZXT. At this point, you'd think all the other case manufacturers would have jumped on board with that. Let's go to, let's see, HDMI input, and I'll put the camera back in the corner like so. And power button. I don't hear anything. Is the fan spinning? Fans are spinning, the rear case fan and the CPU fan and the power supply fan. And there we go. So as I mentioned, Beth's preference is Windows 10. So I'm going to do a clean install on this. So I'll just put the username of user. Since I was originally thinking this would go to Beth, So before I do any product activations or anything, and this is why I save activation for the very end, so I can make changes. So if somebody doesn't want the 4 terabyte drive, if they'd rather have a 2 terabyte and save money, or if they'd rather have a Gen 5 drive, we can switch anything out as they prefer and adjust the price accordingly. So that's our entire build. The cable management on this NZXT case is super easy. If we come around here, step around and give you an idea of how this is done. Once again, this is another reason why I enjoy building an NZXT case is we have these cable tracks here. So the idea is you could take your motherboard power, this big cable here, run it right through this track right here. Just zip tie that, or not zip tie, they've got the Velcro straps right here. Just put that right in there, like so. As for the front port umbilicals, you'll see we've got these little loops, these metal loops that we can run nylon zip ties through those loops. And then on this side, we have loops and a track, and we can run these cables down this track and use those loops for zip ties, like so. We've also got a track up here if we wanted, to run this top fan, say we want it down. These are our 2 carriers for 2.5-inch drives right here. And easy peasy. Put the panels back on after our very easy cable management is completed. And that system is done. It's a very easy build. And this is easily another 8-year build, easily. With 13500 using the stock Intel CPU cooler, that cooler is quiet. It more than adequately cools the CPU even under duress. The CPU never overheats. There's a 13900, not a 900K, but a 13900 that is $300 more, but you don't get $300 more performance. I think the value that you're getting on the 13500 is unmatched right now. That is the best bang for the buck, in my opinion. And I will probably sell more 13500s than any other individual model of CPU because most people want the bargain. If you're buying something really inexpensive, it's likely going to need to be replaced that much sooner. It won't have that 8-year lifespan. If you buy something that's really expensive, like the 13900 or 13900K, you run into maintaining heat, keeping the heat under control on those high-end CPUs. They're also more expensive to run. They require more expensive cooling, and they require, in general, more maintenance. Nobody buys a Ferrari for reliability. So if you want to go to that bleeding edge because you got to have the fastest and the best, enjoy the ongoing maintenance that often comes along with that. So here we've got the best of both worlds where we've got that Z790 chipset that gives us all that I/O. We can add a graphics card to it. It's the better CPU and a better GPU aren't going to make you a better gamer or whatever you're actually using the computer for. That's where your skills have to step in as a human being by actually using it. So there you have it. That's our build. We're going to do another build identical to this, probably on Tuesday. And that one will be built in the white version of this case and be able to see them side by side. And you can pick which one you like better. I think this motherboard fits very well in a white or a black case. Okay, so let me just take a look in the chat and see if there's any questions I've missed. LRCX has renewed membership, now a member for 4 months. Says hello, Carey, Marlena, and chat. Hey, Larry, welcome in. Bruce says he's got, or he likes the NZXT H series cases. He's got 2 of them currently. They're very clean looking cases. I agree. Shamim wants to know, is this a full ATX motherboard? Yes, it is. You could tell by the number of screws I had to use. Mortant pops in and says hello, and he's going to catch the live stream later. Well, thanks for popping in and saying hello, Mortant. Johnny Weld said you could use this as a backup fan if the other one breaks. Exactly. Yeah, because it's got the NZXT logo. It'll match and it'll be a simple swap out. AJ Haverkamp says no optical drive. No, you'll see cases nowadays, for the most part, don't give you any space for any external items being put onto, installed into the case. Those are few and far between right now to find a case that has that. Within another 2-3 years, it'll just be gone entirely. The good news is all that stuff you could buy external USB versions of. So if you wanted a DVD drive, they're about $5 more to get an external USB DVD drive. $30 over at Amazon. Doesn't run any slower. And you can just place it on the flat top here, plug it in, and you can read and write DVDs and CDs or even Blu-rays. They sell Blu-ray versions. They're a bit more money, but yeah, everything's moving away from internal. In fact, things are moving away from even storing data internally as everything's going to the cloud. So not too many people using CDs and DVDs or optical media anymore. Generally, the people who do are older folks, and they just don't want to let go of something. But whether or not they choose to let go of it just kind of determines on how difficult they want their life to become, because in general, society will move on with you or without you. And if you insist on holding on to something older, it's probably costing you more money and more trouble than it's worth. I can, for example, buy a USB flash drive that can hold 100 times more than any DVD, 300 times more than a DVD, that records faster, easily rewritable, and is far less expensive and more universal. So I can plug it into anybody's computer. I don't have to worry about scrap. Okay, so it looks like there was a modem reset or a router reset. And we were down, based on the amount of time we were down, that's what I'm guessing has happened. So those of you watching the playback, this will just jump and skip all that. But those of you watching live right now, we had a good two or 3 minutes where we were offline. So yeah, that hasn't happened in a while. But I did see it on this side. I did see my OBS meter go red. Patrick Grusaw said he has a USB 3.5-inch floppy drive. Yeah, exactly. You can still buy floppy drives as USB connections. A lot of older connections, somebody out there is making it with a USB adapter on. Just so you know, if you ever need that stuff. David Graham wants to know what kind of front airflow is there. Well, essentially, when the rear case fan is pushing air out the back, that creates a natural vacuum to pull whatever air it needs, not more air than it needs, through the front of the case. And the front of the case, there are vents. Let's see, this side has the glass panel. So the vents are going to be only, it's going to pull air from underneath here. We do have a filter under here as well. And it's going to pull air from this side panel, which has, if you noticed when I took it off, it's got these holes here. Now, I fail to understand people's fascination on the internet with heat and airflow. I think it's preposterous and ridiculous. I have never met anybody, well, it's very rare that I've ever met anybody that has a problem related to airflow or heat. You would think the way people talk about it online, that this was some kind of epidemic that affects everybody, when in fact, in reality, maybe 1 out of 100,000 people ever experiences a problem with heat due to airflow. And even that may be a generous number. I'm estimating, based on being in this business for over 30 years, I may have fixed maybe as many as a half dozen computers with heat-related problems. Most people who have heat-related problems are self-inflicted. Either they've overclocked the machine, overvolted the machine, or they're trying to outsmart the engineer in some ways. In most cases, they create their own problems. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. The fascination and fixation on airflow is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. There's a weird obsession with heat that is completely unjustifiable online and does not affect most users ever. So I don't know why we talk about it and we're so fixated on it. I think the doctors now can prescribe pills to help you with that if it's something you're obsessed with, but it's unjustifiable. The only time that people should run into heat issues is if they're overclocking, if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, basically. And that comes with the territory of, doing that kind of behavior. There are some circumstances where people will run into heat issues when they're benchmarking their computer and they insist that they need to fix that. But I ask them when the computer overheats outside of benchmarking, and they say it doesn't. Okay, well, if you want to spend your time and money to fix an issue that isn't an issue because it bothers you, because it's in your head, it's your time and your money. But I can tell you, no client's ever paid me to do that. It's never, ever happened. So when it comes to actually hiring somebody to do the work versus you're a hobbyist at home with nothing else better to do, looking for problems that aren't really problems because it makes you feel like you've accomplished something, please don't confuse all the other viewers, the novice viewers, who think you're actually solving something that matters and that they should be worried about too. This gets to be like a very toxic and infectious attitude that gets picked up online, but it doesn't really exist outside of online. It's very, very strange. This is not experimental electronics. These are consumer grade electronics. They can run under extreme circumstances and can be completely mishandled. The fact that it's designed for consumers is really all you need to know. Now, if we're at a research and development lab at MIT, these things matter. But for consumer stuff, it's ridiculous, in my opinion, to really mention it or talk about it. But if somebody is having a legitimate heat issue running everything at stock, voltages and speeds, it would suggest to me that you have the heatsink not mounted properly or an inadequate heatsink has been put on it. It's generally not something that's resolved through fans and airflow. But some people, that's their fun. I don't want to take their fun from them. I just don't want their fun to confuse innocent viewers into thinking that's something you really need to. I wish it was, because I could, with the number of people who talk about it online, if that were a real problem, I'd be a millionaire fixing all those problems that people have with heat. It just doesn't exist. It's very, very rare. Okay, so let's take a look here in the chat, see what else we're talking about. Shamim wants to know, with regards to how fast that TerraMaster is, how responsive it is, do I think it may be related to the RAM? No, absolutely not. In most cases, RAM has no impact on the performance of file transfer on a NAS. That is traditionally helpful if you're loading a lot of apps on your NAS, which I don't run any apps, apart from the default, SMB and stuff like that you've got to run. I don't run third-party apps. If you're going to install apps onto your NAS, then having more RAM is going to make those apps more responsive. But with regards to just in general, file browsing, copying files to and fro, RAM doesn't really, in my experience, make any difference whatsoever in the performance of the NAS in that regard. So if you're not running any additional apps on your NAS, you are wasting money putting more RAM in it. Having RAM you don't use is the same as not having it. So why would you spend money on something you're not using? I think the reason it's faster has a bit to do with the efficiency of the operating system that TerraMaster is using, and also a higher end processor that TerraMaster is using. Like the Synology is using a Realtek processor, and the last Synology we reviewed is using a 4-year-old Intel Celeron. So I believe the reason the TerraMaster is more responsive is they're using a more modern, more powerful system. In fact, I haven't heard back from Minisform on that little NAS I'm building, but that thing should be even faster if I can get the drivers for it. Captain Blinsky says he's got hundreds invested in CD and DVD reproduction equipment that still works great, and I embrace having both old school and the new e-portability of flash drives in the cloud also. Sure, I get that. I mean, I know people that have 35 millimeter cameras and they've got tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. You know, they've got this massive investment. And, you know, if you're using it, all the power to you. It just becomes less useful as it gets replaced by cheaper, faster, smaller, more reliable technology. Microsoft's got something called Silica. Silica? They're working on, which is going to have a data lifespan of 10,000 years. And it's just a little piece of glass about this big, and it goes into a reader. And it's essentially a electronic microscope that reads the data off of it. I'd love to see that come to market. Shamim says, thank you. Well, thank you, Shamim. There's Barry Klein joining us, saying hello. Gary Tatum said heat isn't nearly as much of a problem as bad sheet metal in a case. Yeah, you remember that story I told you, huh? Used to work with a guy that swore he worked for a PC builder and that sometimes they just couldn't figure out why some new PC they built wasn't working. So they'd take all the parts out, put it into a different case, and it would work fine. And they would junk the case saying it's bad sheet metal. I was like, hey, you get any of those bad sheet metal cases laying around, I'd take them off your hands for you. PSC Computers Missouri says, hey, Carey, good to see another great live stream, sir. Have a blessed day. Right on. Thank you. You too. And there's Douglas Burchell saying hello. Welcome in, Douglas. Martin Hogg says hello. Welcome in, Martin, watching us all the way from Scotland. Of course, our friend Buster, I'm sure will be watching later. We'll shout out to Buster. There's Kelly Stewart joining us. Kelly Stewart sent an Amazon gift card earlier. My thanks, of course, to Kelly. All right, what's on your mind? We got a few minutes left. I can look up that article about the Microsoft Silica. Let's see, on full screen here on this computer so I can see it the way you guys see it. Hey, look at that, I can see it now. And I will open up Microsoft Edge. Start without my data, uncheck this box. Confirm and continue. Continue without this data. Uncheck this box. Such a pain. Just close it. All right. Microsoft Silica. Project Silica is what it's called. And you can read all about it here, but it's putting the data in basically what appears to be a pane of glass, a little piece of glass. You see all those pieces of glass lined up, and this little reader goes back and forth. And each one of those, I'm trying to remember what the storage capacity was on these. They first showed this off in 2017, but they're still working on it. This is when I talk about research and development, right? This is not yet ready for consumers. It's a little too fragile. But by the time it comes out and is available, assuming it will be for consumers, it'll be very difficult to screw it up. Just as flash drives are difficult to screw up. Things that are built for consumers, generally speaking, are very, very robust most of the time. Let's say what the capacity is. Publications, videos, career opportunities, overview. Capacity upwards of 7 terabytes in a square glass platter the size of a DVD. And using beam steering of the laser beam, we're able to achieve system level aggregate write throughputs comparable to current archival systems. So they're considering this archival, and it's supposed to be archival for a minimum of 10,000 years. This is all theory. It'd be very difficult for people to prove that. But I can't wait for that to come out. Remember, I talked about storing data on holographic crystals. It's getting close. PSC Computers Missouri contributes $10 in super chat. Right on. Thank you for that. PSC Computers. Shamim wants to know, do you think it's weird for me to dislike RGB in a PC, but wanting a glass case anyway? Me personally, I like to see the parts of the PC, even if it doesn't have any RGB. Shamim, who cares if anybody thinks it's weird? It's your money. It's your preference. You might like putting ketchup on your ketchup. Somebody might think it's weird, but they're not the one eating it. Who cares? Doesn't matter what other people think. Nothing wrong with your preferences, and there's no reason to justify them or to look to others for approval. Martin Hogg says, wow, Star Trek gets real. Remember the flip phone? Where do you think they got that idea? Behom says to Shamim, I like a glass case regardless of RGB or, you know, whether it has RGB or not. I remember the first time I saw one, I was just fascinated. For me personally, I'm not a fan of RGB, but a little bit of RGB. If it's done tastefully, I like it. Marlena, on the other hand, she likes full-on unicorn puke. I think she would put RGB on her RGB if she could. It's her money.
I have an RGB mouse pad.
She has an RGB mouse pad.
Keyboard, and my whole computer. It's all RGB. Love it. Free to look at.
You know what? You don't have to justify your weirdness to anybody. She's got the big helicopter build that we did, the Apache helicopter case build, and that thing is just chock full of RGB. See if I can pull it up here. Let's pull up YouTube, and we'll search for CareyHolzman Apache. Guess that's not going to work. CareyHolzman. What did I say it was called? An ATH something or AHT 600 or something like that. Ah.
Worried your bank isn't secure?
It's
With Chime, you're protected with real-time alerts and 24/7 support. If something happens, disable your card with a single tap and turn it on again just as easy. Apply today at chime.com, where your money is secure.
Dear Tiffany,
Oh, another
you took
ad.
over the family business and are
So I have
wondering if you
YouTube
made the
Premium.
right
I paid
decision.
what is it, $12
But as
a
crazy
month
as
or
it
whatever.
sounds, you made the
I'm
best
so
decision. That application to open
used to
call
not
is
seeing
going to
ads, I
change your
don't
life.
even know how to respond. Okay, so
Hey,
this
guys,
is the
here's a build.
computer
It's really
Marlena's
ridiculous.
using.
Solid state. And we're getting some reflection. I don't know if I can get rid of that reflection because I have to go this way. Okay, so I've got to fire it up.
She's got RGB on her RGB. And it's working great. We've never had to repair it. Although she tells me she wants to replace it with Robot's Foot. If you say so. Feel like I'm going down the Las Vegas Strip. If you say so. And then she's got the miniature version of this as her media computer. So she's not hurting computer-wise. She's pretty good to go there. I'm going to shut this down. So then we'll go back full screen on camera 1. Yeah, Martin wants to know if you're still going to do that video on that Cisco switch. She says, just tell her when. So we have the switch. It's just kind of off to the side as other more pressing projects requiring my time. Customers always come first. And the business, you know, we get busy and then nothing. So right now I'm in a busy peak. And then some years Christmas gets crazy busy and other years completely dead. So as time permits, it's just a little side project for the channel. We'll probably also cover like setting up a simple VoIP. I've got a VoIP phone I bought for $15 brand new from eBay. And that'll all be Mara's work because I don't know how to do any of that. Douglas Burchell said they should have made propellers for the fans. Patrick Grusaw says he puts ranch on his eggs. See, no judgment. That's what you like. Have at it. See if I missed anybody's contribution. I think I got them all. Oh, I should check the phone, huh? Let me check the phone. Well, it looks like I got a mini PC coming. And, oh, customer's emailing me with a support question. So I'll have to get to that after the show. Thanks again to Frankie B for a very generous Amazon gift card that was submitted earlier. And our good friend Kelly Stewart, who also sent an Amazon gift card. And thanks to Beth for her patience as we will build her an entirely different but similar system. Like I said, I have two of these motherboards and they both have to get built anyway. So instead of pushing this one aside and waiting for the white version of this case, I thought, let's just go ahead and finish this one up today and we'll start again on Tuesday with a very identical build. And we'll do the motherboard prep on Tuesday, likely with putting the motherboard and power supply into the case on Wednesday, just like we did this week. So you might sense a little deja vu, but we will have basically the same system, one with a black case, one with a white case. And I think that motherboard will work equally well. And you know, when we put that panel on, the glass panel, sometimes case manufacturers will use a tint on the glass, and sometimes they don't. This one looks like there's no tint on it, which means that you could see it just fine without RGB. And of course, there's the plastic that's still on here, and I will ship it with the plastic on there, so I'm not going to do the peel. But that will make the glass a little bit clearer than it is right now. The RGB can also be turned off in the BIOS. Peter VZ contributes €1. Thank you, Peter. David Moore contributes £2. He says, hello, Carey, and all in chat. Thank you, David. Hello to you, my friend.
Thank you, Peter.
Bay Home 43, that's Beth. She says, it sounds good to me, Carey. I'm looking forward to the white build. It's all interesting and informative to me. And if you know what, Beth, if you like the black better than the white, you can change your mind. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to be left over with one. And I think it's going to look great either way.
Turn it.
You taking pictures?
Yeah. That looks
Yeah, you can see what a pleasure it is working in the NZXT case. Just plenty of room to get your cabling in there. I like the NZXT power supplies. Again, I've never had one go bad, although I've only got maybe half a dozen of them, fewer than 10 out in the field, but nonetheless, we're off to a good start. And they've been in the field for 4 or 5 years now. So knock on wood, we haven't had one go bad. David Graham contributes a $5 super chat. He says, I can light a match with all the air coming from my PC, but I don't overheat. Jim KJ3N says, I still like the Cougar MX410 mesh as a basic case. I agree with you. Although it's a little flimsy, the metal's a little thin. I do like that it's got 2 USB 3 Type A's and 2 USB 2 Type A ports on the Cougar Mesh MX410. It's also a very inexpensive case. It's very lightweight. It's very compact. You can get it without glass on the side, so it's appropriate for business use. I'm with you. I agree. And for the price, can't be beat. You know, I would have loved to have seen 4 USB ports on top, but at the very least, give me the 2 USB Type A's instead of the 1. 1 USB Type C is normal. I don't have a problem with that. But just having that 1 USB Type A up front kind of bugs. Now, NZXT does make the, is it the H7 case? H7? And I believe it will have 2 USB 3s and 2 USB 2s and the Type C, if I'm not mistaken. Beth says, I wish I could use them both. You can always have a backup. That's just twice as much maintenance, though. You know. That's why when people want a dual boot, like I won't support people that dual boot. I understand if you want to load a virtual machine, totally respect that. But if you want to create a dual boot where you want Windows 10 and Windows 11 and Linux or whatever, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintenance. And it can be very confusing to set up. So again, if you're a hobbyist sitting at home and you want to take on that project, enjoy your project. I don't want to get involved in it. I've got work to do and customers that have problems that need to be resolved. So, you know, for me, I don't have the patience for it. You know, if you want to use a different operating system, can't make up your mind, whatever reason, just put it in a virtual machine or get a separate computer. So if you want one computer with Windows 10, one computer with Windows 11, either way, you're still doing double the maintenance. You know, when Windows updates come out, you're going to be getting 2 computers. The more computers you have, the more you realize what a pain in the butt it is to keep them all maintained. So in an office that has 20, 30, 40 computers, if I go in there once a month to do updates, I'll be there easily 8 hours to update all those computers. And, you know, even here at Studio B, where I've got a number of computers laying around, I will periodically put them up on the bench here, just run updates on them so that later on I won't have to wait to do even more updates later, so that when I need that computer, whether I'm selling it or I'm making another follow-up video on it, it won't take as long to get it updated. This includes laptops and BIOS updates and everything that goes along with it, just multiplied times however many computers you have. And after a while, it'll feel like you're spending more time updating the computers than you are actually using them. So that gets under my skin personally, because that's not why I have computers. I don't have them so I can just run benchmarks on them and update them. I actually want to use them. But that's just me. That's my perspective on that subject. Kelly Stewart wants to know, Carey, did you ever get a hold of the company that made the case? You built a system for me. It was about the way it was constructed. I don't remember what case I built for you, Kelly, and I have no recollection of any of this conversation. I don't know how long ago that was, but I'm sorry, I don't remember it. Gooden in the chat says, Carey, I have 2 Dell Dimension 4300 towers. The exterior is 17 inches by 17 inches by 7 inches wide. Will this build fit in it? I have no idea. Some of the system integrators' cases are proprietary in ways that you won't really understand until you take it apart and try and build in it. Then you'll find out, that it's cheaper for the system integrators to have their own designs. It can make assembly faster, and it can force customers to have to go back to them for any repair work. Sometimes they use proprietary power supplies. Sometimes they have, for example, a proprietary front port header where the power switch, reset switch, power LED, hard drive LED are completely non-conforming to industry standards. Sometimes they won't have the right mounting holes in the right places, or even the right number of PCI slots, or even the location of the PCI slots can be wrong. So Dell makes tens of thousands of different makes and models over the years and different designs. Some were fully modular, but most were not. So I just don't know. You just have to try and see what happens. For me personally, I wouldn't recycle an old case, mainly because you're not going to have USB 3 ports on an older case, but also it's going to look like and feel like an old computer. You can take old parts and put them into a new case. It has the reverse. It'll feel like a new computer because the case is the thing you're looking at. So cases are relatively inexpensive, and I wouldn't take the risk, me personally. Or I'd say, you know what? I'm going to try it. If it doesn't work, then I'll plan on buying a case in that scenario. But that's something you'd have to tell me whether or not that fit. I have no idea. Just there's far too many different Dell designs over the years. It's possible. I was going to check which key press activates the boot menu, this motherboard. Somebody asked me that, and I was like, I have no idea. Turn this back on for a second. Let's go back to our HDMI. Put myself in the corner again. And turn this back on. And does it say at the bottom of the screen? Press F2, F6. Oh, I missed it. It does say on the bottom right side which function key activates the boot menu. Got to read it quickly. Start it. Right down in the bottom right side here, you'll see what the function keys do. And it's only there for a moment, so you've got to sort of prepare to see it. I'm going to walk up closer to the screen. Not sure why this is taking so long. All right, there it goes. This says, any minute now. Here we go. Third one from the bottom. F11 is the boot menu. There we go. So if we wanted to boot from a flash drive or an alternative boot source, F11 on this model of ASRock motherboard. Now again, that may not be the same across all ASRock motherboards. So I was curious which key that was. And in most of the time when you turn a system on, it will tell you that information unless you've disabled it in the BIOS. That's usually something that can be disabled in the BIOS. I like to always have that available, and this BIOS right now is at all of its default settings anyway. All right. F11, shut that down. And back over to Douglas Burchell's enjoying the giveaway computer he got, the AWOW mini PC. Glad you're enjoying it, Douglas. That's, of course, thanks to the generosity of our good friend Peter Laycock, or Buster, that made that gift possible. Jim KJ3N posts a link to KrugerGaming.com, which shows all the different variations of the MX410 case. Kelly Stewart said the case was from Silverstone. So Silverstone had sent me 4 or 5 different cases. I really, again, have no reference to what you're talking about. I don't remember. If you have a link to the video and I can go back and look to it, or if you have a link to a conversation we had about what it was about the case, I'm sorry. I work on so many computers. I probably in any given week go through at least a dozen different computers as an average. Some are a little less, sometimes a little more in a week. So, you know, I try and get through them as quickly as possible and move on to the next one. And unless I'm seeing a particular case over and over and over and over again, I likely don't see them ever again. Like it's kind of a manufacturer sends me a case, like we've got the Be Quiet Shadow Base 800DX here. And I plan on moving the components out of that fractal design, whatever it's called, that belongs to Serve the Home YouTube channel. And I'm going to gut it and put all those parts into the Be Quiet case. I will likely never see another Shadow Base 800DX again. And so after that, I'll be building in another case and another case and another case. Then I'm going to a client's and I'm working on their computers, their cases. It's just more information than my brain can hold. So I have no recollection of which case we used. I have no recollection of whatever questions were. You'd have to find an old email or conversation that we had. And I can dig around and see if that was something I already talked to Silverstone about, or if I got so distracted onto other projects I never followed through. I don't know. The good thing about being busy is, of course, time flies and it brings in money so I can pay bills. The downside of it is I'm going through things so quickly that having any detailed memory of specifics of a particular build is long since gone. I've built over 30,000 computers in my career, and I vaguely remember them. Like, I was trying to find, like on eBay, a vintage TriStar CAD computer, those that are built in 1991. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to have it. But they're monstrous, they're heavy. It wouldn't be any good to use it today. But it's kind of where I started professionally in this field. And I built a lot of those, a lot of them. So I know them like the back of my hand because I did it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it was the same case, even though we were using different motherboards and different configurations for each customer. We really only had one case to pick from back. How I wish I still had one of those cases today. Monstrous, huge, steel. Yeah, probably all turned yellow by now. Yeah, Kelly continues to tell me little vague details. I'm sorry, man. You'd have to find a conversation that we had, or is there a specific question you wanted answered? I'm not quite sure how to respond to you at this point because I just don't have any idea what you're talking about. I understand I built you a computer with a Silverstone case. Regardless of whatever little details you're giving me, it's just not enough. I have no recollection of any issues. You have to follow up with me within a reasonable period of time if you expect me to remember it. Because how long ago was that? Was it 2 years ago? 3 years ago? But if you have a specific question about the case and you want to ask that, feel free to reach out to me and see if I can reach out to Silverstone and get an answer. All right, well, I guess that about will wrap it up for today. It's getting on nearly 2 hours already. Time flies when you're having fun. My thanks to everybody who's contributed during today's broadcast, including our good friend Kelly Stewart there. And a shout out and a thank you to Paul O'Brien and Planet Cryos for your super chat contributions today. Thank you to David Graham and Mark Gaines, as well as Samuel Kowalski, LRCX, PSC Computers Missouri, Peter VZ, David Moore, and Mats Olof. How can I forget Mats Olof? Thank you so much for your continued support and generosity, joining us all the way from Sweden. And thank you for the Amazon gift cards from Kelly Stewart and from our good friend Frankie B with a very generous Amazon gift card, I might add. Yeah, I think that catches us up. Just checking email one more time. That all looks good. So, all right, guys. I think I'll be live again tomorrow. I have a bunch of work to do, so just have to figure out what it is I'm going to do. You might sense deja vu. Next Tuesday, we're going to prep the motherboard, identical to this one, same CPU, same RAM, same storage. Then on a week from today, next Wednesday, I'll plan on putting the motherboard into the white version of the NZXT 510. Now, outside of that, I'm not quite sure which videos I'm doing next because I have some mini PCs that are supposed to come in, but I don't know when they're going to come in. So it's hard for me to tell you when I'm going to make a video on them. And then there's some other parts that I've ordered that I'm waiting to come in. So it's hard for me to, once again, until I have the parts in my hands, I don't schedule any videos because I've had deliveries delayed. They say, hey, it's going to show up today. And then they say it'll show up later today. And then they say it'll show up tomorrow. So I don't make plans until for the videos until I actually have the parts on hand. And sounds like I'm getting a delivery. So I will let you guys go. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Appreciate Beth's patience. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Should be at the regular 1 o'clock Pacific time starting time. So in the meantime, be sure and check out Jim KJ3N, who's in our YouTube channel, has his own YouTube channel. He makes excellent videos, as does Planet Cryos, as does Doug Betts, Live Windows Training with Doug Betts. So there's more content for you to enjoy until we're back again tomorrow. Hope you'll check them out, subscribe to them, give them a thumbs up, show them a little love. It's all good. And I think you'll really enjoy their content. That'll wrap it up for me for today. Thank you to Camera Girl for setting up today's video and thumbnail. And thanks to all of you. I'll see you all very, very soon. And until next time, bye for now.